strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Children of generations, of every nation, of kingdom come. Don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth: God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from.
Good morning.
You gotta turn the music on?
It's not on in here. It's not on the live
Oh,
stream.
it's just on us? Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Good morning, Orange, Texas. We are here with our Wednesday Live. Oh, thank you. We're here with our Wednesday Live, and today we are looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And Brandon, would you do the honor of reading the first section?
Of course. All right, let's do this then. Be imitators of me as I also am of Christ. Now I praise you because you remember me in all things and keep the traditions, just as I delivered them to you. But I want you to know that Christ is the head of every man, and the man is the head of the woman, and God is the head of Christ. Every man who prays or prophesies with something on his head dishonors his head. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head, since that it is one and the same as having her head shaved. So if let's go through 6. So if a woman's head is not covered, her hair should be cut off. But if it is disgraceful for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, she should be covered.
All right. So that is an interesting section, isn't it, guys?
Yeah, it's great.
All right.
I like verse 1.
Okay, so let's start with verse 1.
Although I don't like verse 1.
Yeah, it's a weird. So there's a couple of things in here, right? Maintain the traditions even as I delivered them to you, which is an interesting idea here, is that he is talking specifically about traditions. And Paul is, he's speaking to this church there, and in a couple of different places in Paul's writing, there's one that stands out where he says, about this I have nothing from the Lord, but from me I say, as for me I say, that kind of things, where it's like, now who is Paul speaking for? Because sometimes he is very careful to say, like, I am speaking to you now with all of the authority of an apostle. I am one who has been sent by God. This message that I carry is not from me. It is from the Lord. But it seems as if in this section that he's speaking about, again, maintaining certain traditions. And so I think we have to really kind of push past the expression of the tradition to see kind of the heart of what's being said here. And so we kind of start with this idea of the husband is the head of the, that every man, Christ is the head of every man, the husband is the head of the wife, that's what, and it's talking about order, right? That there is an order to how families are to be. And he has this same idea in Ephesians, and this isn't uncommon, and it's anyway, it's just sort of how families are supposed to work. And I know as pastors, we have seen, we see a lot of dysfunction in families. I engage with families probably every couple of weeks. We'll have a family that's at some level of dysfunction, even at a level of crisis, where something is just broken down in the family, something's not working right. And how often could we go back to this and say, well, you're not following him, or he's not leading you, or neither of you are following Christ, right? And it's like, it's seems like a real oversimplification of what are often some complicated issues, but normally when the dysfunction starts, it starts with a breakdown. I think a breakdown spiritually. And so I think, that's the heart of what he's saying here. And then out of that, we have this talk about head coverings and the length of someone's hair. So, yeah.
Which we should mention is cultural, right?
Well, I think one thing that has always stuck with me, I took a New Testament seminary extension class a few years ago, and the professor said that the really difficult thing about Paul is to determine what was meant for the culture that he was living in, and what is something that applies to the ideas and the concepts and the doctrine that applies to all of us.
Yeah.
And this is one chapter where I see that it could be a lot just with that culture, the way they behaved, or totally different. We don't understand at all what that culture was like, and these things about the hair and no hair, and our culture is certainly different today. But if you read though the rest of the passage, it talks about, I think the last thing Paul would want to happen from this chapter is for us to go to someone and say, this is what the Bible says, you need to do something different.
Right. Well, and,
That's the last thing he would want to do.
I think he's very careful in his order
Yeah.
in that this has come after discussions on unity. It's come after discussions on conflict and all of these other things. And even in things that are much more important and much more, I think, opportunity for division and conflict.
Also for evangelism, for
evangelism.
for winning others.
Yeah, and he's dealt with all of those things, and he's talked about how you maintain, unity throughout all of those things. So this is a secondary, but I don't want to completely undermine or negate what he's saying here, because I think what he is saying is important, and in this, and that's, when you talk about head covering or hair length, if you look at it sort of across history, there are two things, sort of expressions of rebellion that men have made with their hair. One is men have grown long hair as an expression of rebellion or rejection of their societal norms, whatever sort of society that is, that men with long hair have always sort of been an outlier apart from what's gone on. And you see that in the Old Testament, right? Like the Nazirite vow of not cutting your hair, it was in a lot of ways, it was a rejection of the culture, and it was a pursuit after the Lord. It says, because other parts of that vow keep you from doing things that are a normal part of the culture. Like, you take this vow, and all of a sudden you can't go to funerals. You can't have, these other relationships, right? And so it marks you as being separate. The other expression of separation through haircut is a shaved head, right? And we see that across culture. Like, we see that and like across all cultures, that when someone has, whether it's like berserkers in, armies 1,000 years ago, they would shave their head and run into battle with their heads painted blue, that kind of thing. But still, it's setting apart. One of the things that I find really interesting is that Paul is writing here into this culture, and in this culture, long hair on a man, it held that same sort of connotation of a rejection or setting oneself apart from the mainstream of the culture. And shaving your head has always done the same thing. And people today will still, there are people who probably will get on you about having long hair, but we're much more accepting of men who shave their heads, which is, and this is, to me, a shaved head in our culture, I think, connects people more with radicalism than long hair does, because like there's literally a subculture within our larger culture of skinheads, of skinheads who they literally take the cross of Christ and they break it and they twist it for their own purposes, and they make it about racial purification and all of these horrible things. They preach hatred, and so it's like, so the question is, how far do we, and really this connects back to what he's spoken about before, which is like this idea of meat sacrificed to idols, and how much do we let our liberty impact
Our witness.
our witness, and how much do we let our liberty push on someone else's conscience? And so it's a struggle, I think.
Well, and you see Paul saying, become all things to win some. Well, you can't grow long hair and shave your hair too to win both of those groups simultaneously.
Right.
And you also see in verse 1 too, which is also kind of part of chapter 10, imitate me as I follow after Christ.
Yeah.
But what does that mean to imitate? I mean, is it imitating the exterior? I think you would probably argue that the heart is so much more, because you hear his thoughts on circumcision. He's like, dude, just go ahead and emasculate yourselves. So,
Right.
I mean, the exterior stuff can really be taken to a legalistic norm that I don't think God really desires. And although you see the humor in the Old Testament, don't make fun of a bald head guy, otherwise she-bears are coming to
She-bears,
chew you
yeah, I'll
up.
get
So
you.
the bears.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think for me, a lot of it comes back to being a heart issue, and that is, and I'm not putting you on the spot here, but it's
No,
like,
put me on the spot.
I'll
It's
put you on the
okay.
spot. It's like,
Let's do it.
so why grow your hair out? Like, and so like, if it's just like, it's like, why, like, I remember when I first grew out my beard, it was like, why are you growing your beard? It's like, I just got tired of shaving. Like, that was it. And I had a friend who's like, I asked him, I was like, hey, you're growing a beard. Why are you growing your beard? He's like, well, I'm hiding my double chin. And I was like, it's not working. But, it's like, but we have reasons for things, or maybe we don't. But so it's like, what is your reason for having long hair? And I'm not asking you. I'm not putting you on the spot.
I
So it's
just like it.
You just like it. Okay, so there you go.
I guess I grew up, listening to rock and roll, which going back to that book that
Yeah.
you just gave me.
I don't know. I just gave Brandon a book that was printed probably 40 years ago about the dangers of rock music, and anyway, it was a little joke gift.
I'm
for
gonna
him,
read
but
it.
He's
I'm
gonna read it.
I'm gonna read it. I mean, I guess I just grew up listening to rock and roll. I saw those guys.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I really like that. And I guess it's gone from hair to tattoos to
Yeah.
skinny jeans. I don't know. I mean,
And so I guess my thing is, and you and I have talked about not just the hair, but
yeah,
other things, is that it's like, if what does it take to open a door to take the gospel to a place? And so I see a tranche within our culture of young people who are musicians, who are unreached by the gospel, who are living this kind of rock and roll thing, who have rejected the gospel or have just never been exposed to it one way or the other. And so for me, it's like, if your long hair and tattoos opens that door and you're going through that door with the gospel, then great. It's fine. Now, if you're growing your long hair and doing tattoos,
just being just like down with the
exactly,
Yeah.
down with the system, then then that's
which
not
I
good.
don't, by the way.
At least he's not. Or if it's a vainglorious thing, like Absalom with his beautiful flowing hair, then it's, and so it's kind of the same. And it's that issue can be in so many things. I had a professor who, he called out one of my fellow students in seminary because the guy was talking about how the day before he had spent an hour and a half in the gym. He's like, yesterday I did leg day and I did an extended workout. I spent an hour and a half on my legs, and the dude was really like swole. And My professor called this guy out in front of everybody because he had made a big point of telling everybody how much time he had spent in the gym. And he calls him down and he says, you need to maintain health. You need to work out 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week. Science has shown us that. Why do you spend 5-6 hours a week? He's like, how much time do you spend? He says, 5 to 6 hours a week. He says, why are you doing that? Because it seems like you're just doing that for the sake of vanity. And he was just like, and he really, and later on he kind of told us, like, I really took that to heart. And I was doing a lot of it for just vanity. And so, there's a lot of it comes back to the sort of the motivation, what's there. So let me pick up reading at 7. For a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. And man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head, because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman was made from man, so man is now born of woman, and all things are from God. Judge for yourself. So let me stop there at verse 12, right? So this is one of those passages where it's like, if you were to pick out any of those verses and read just that verse, you're probably going to make somebody angry, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because each of them, right, if you were to proof text it, you probably any of them, it's like, man was not made from woman, but woman from man. It's like, well, hold on, like that's going to upset people, especially sort of in our culture. But if you look beyond just the individual verse, if you look at it at more of like a paragraph kind of perspective, right? What's the heart of his message there? Right? It's that man and woman is that they're connected. Mm-hmm. That there's no way to have manhood or womanhood apart from the other, right? So it's really pointing to the union of the two, and that all of them are from God. And so then he goes on in verse 13, judge for yourselves, is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? Right? Judge for yourselves. Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, is it a disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory. For her hair is given to her for a covering. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, we have no such practice, nor do the churches of God. So it's that, I guess, kind of that second statement that he makes there is that judge for yourselves, where previously he said these are traditions, and now he says judge for yourselves. And yeah, he makes an argument here that nature itself teaches this or that, but ultimately he kind of leaves it up to the individuals. This isn't a written in stone commandment. This is where there has to be some flexibility. And even the way he closes the section, right? If anyone's inclined to be contentious, if you're going to make a fight out of this, then there's no room for you here, right? That's not part of what we're doing. So, yeah. So have you ever felt like anybody got really contentious about your hair?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Not in a long time.
Not in a long time?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, when I was in high school, and same with my brother. My brother kind of took the force of all of the churches.
Yeah. And he's been in
unrest.
He's been in a lot of churches too. Yeah. I mean, he's not just like one church, but yeah.
So I mean, I think because he was older, and I think a lot of people thought we were the same person. I don't think many people knew us individually.
Yeah.
So he kind of got the brunt of all of that.
Yeah.
But that was also because the drums too. So.
Yeah. He was a trailblazer.
Yeah,
so.
he was.
Yeah.
Go Chris.
Go Chris. But yeah. And yeah. So.
Yeah, I don't know.
I haven't heard. I mean, I've been here for 3 years, and here I haven't heard much contention around hair or head covering or any of that.
We live in such a individualistic society. Everybody just, for the way you dress and the way you look, it's just your own thing, your own expression. We're just, and that's part of our cultural that's what defines us as a culture, is our freedom, you know, and that's part of it. And I think there's also an acceptance in our culture that if somebody wants to be different, that's fine. You can be different, but I'm
But
not
I guess
gonna hold you against it.
with what Paul was talking about as far as like the head coverings go and stuff, I mean, it's true that you did have the Jewish culture and the the Gentile Greek culture kind of just like
Yeah.
he was just like, if it's going to cause fights, just do it, or
Right.
I guess just cover your head if that's what it takes, and because unity I guess is more important. So, I mean, I could look at that as far as the silly hat thing. It's just like if it's going to cause unrest, just take it off. I guess.
Right, take a hat off.
It's like, but at the same time, just like, does it really? I don't know.
Well, and I think that's always the struggle, is just because we saw it in politics, is people start talking about their political belief system and you assume everybody thinks like you, and everybody doesn't. I mean, everybody, just even looking at all of us across here, hairstyles, I mean, we're different, and we all have some type of facial hair. It really truly is preferential, but we tend to impose our belief systems on others, thinking they all think like us, walk like us, watch
Yeah.
the same kind of movies and shows and read books, and we're just different. And you see that here, I mean, as we're beginning this reading of chapter 11, 12, 13, and 14, it's these practices inside the context of the church where Paul is trying to give some direction, with head coverings, fixing to get into the Lord's Supper, some issues that were going on there.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we're missing the point.
Yeah, and I think part of we are a multi-generational church. We are a multi-socioeconomic status church. We are a multi-ethnic church, and so I know Easter Sunday, it was beautiful to see people of all sort of different strata and different variations here. And one of the great things about that, and I think it's part of the reason that we're called to follow God in groups, in churches, is that I think it's important for our sanctification to kind of live life in constant rubbing, friction, contact with other people, so that, because if I went to church with everybody who is exactly like me, then we would all have the exact same blind spots, we'd have the exact same weaknesses, we'd all forgive the same way, and we would never push each other or challenge each other. And so you have long hair, and that may be a challenge for some people to say, like, I know Brandon, and he has long hair, and he has a heart for the Lord. And so having to kind of bring those two things and accept both of them may be a challenge for a person's way of thinking, but that's part of the process of sanctification, is to take the beliefs that we hold and challenge them and hopefully grow as a result of it. And so, I think that's part of the reason that we're called to live as Christians in churches while we live in marriage, is that we have a person with us that is constantly, kind of pushing us forward. So, I'm going to read, actually, Brad, would you read verses 17 through 22?
Okay. But in following instructions, I do not commend you, because when you come together, it is not for the better, but for the worse. For in the first place, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and I believe it in part, for there must be factions among you, in order that those who are genuine among you may be recognized. When you come together, it is not the Lord's Supper that you eat, for in eating, each one goes ahead with his own meal. One goes hungry, another gets drunk. What? Do you not have houses to eat in or drink in? And do you despise the church of God and humiliate those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I commend you in this? No, I will not. Like I said last week, I don't think I can imitate how forceful his language may be in these verses. For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, he took the cup after supper, saying, "The cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes."
All right. All right, so it's picture of the Lord's Supper, and it's a
Is it kind of like saying here, like, if they were gathering at church to eat, and anytime they ate at church, they were calling it the Lord's Supper?
well, I think part of how they practiced the Lord's Supper was very different than how we do it. In
Yeah.
that every time they ate, it was like the Lord's Supper. They
Yeah.
ate together. Especially you get that passage in Acts that they gathered together daily to break bread and pray, and and so they were living life together in that kind of way. And so I think there was much more eating and dining together than there is now, where we celebrate the Lord's Supper as a ceremony essentially, and it's like every other month, right? And I've thought a lot about, and we have all thought and talked a lot about the Lord's Supper over the last year as we've dealt with coronavirus, and how it is that we do the Lord's Supper and not risk infection for other people. And so we've thought through a lot of those things, and one of the things that really stands out is that we want to practice the Lord's Supper in we kind of have some guiding principles when we do the Lord's Supper. And so we've said we wanted everyone to be able to receive the Lord's Supper, and with distance, that's like live streaming people at home. How do you get people at home to take the Lord's Supper? And it's like, well, we could send people into their homes, and then it's like, but then there's a risk of infection. And so we have encouraged people last year around Easter time. We encouraged people to get their own grape juice and crackers, and we did a Lord's Supper online together. And we've had people take the Lord's Supper to people who've asked us to bring it to their homes if they felt comfortable with that. But and he hits that here is like, you're supposed to take it together. This last time we had Lord's Supper, I heard my kids talking to some other kids about it, because my kids, wherever they were sitting, they got the Lord's Supper that was in the prepackaged cups, that you had to peel the top off. Mm-hmm. And did any of you guys have those? Mm-hmm. You've had them before?
Yeah.
Yeah. They are, to call them garbage would be unfair to garbage. They are so, they taste, the bread is like styrofoam. It weakens me like Bolt. It's bad. And the grape juice is, it's fine, but the kids were like, oh, you got the good stuff. Like, you got the real grape juice. You got the real grape juice and the crunchy Lord's Supper.
Yeah.
You didn't get the styrofoam. And they were trying to explain to one of their friends how bad the styrofoamy one was. And it's like maybe the only time that I've ever really considered that's kind of, sort of a picture of what this church was doing, in that you had some people who were of a higher class that were getting sort of this more elegant. There's one of the commentators I read described it as like the variation in an airplane. That there were some who are in first class, business class, economy, and then like coach, and that's kind of how they were doing the Lord's Supper. And anyway, it's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a celebration of future glory that we all celebrate together, and they're really missing the point when you do it that way. So, Rusty, do you want to pick up the last of those verses in this
Sure.
chapter?
So in verse 27, it says, whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and the blood of the Lord. Let a person examine himself then, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself. That is why many of you are weak and ill, and some have died. But if we judged ourselves truly, we would not be judged. But when we are judged by the Lord, we are disciplined, so that we may not be condemned along with the world. So then, my brothers, when you come together, eat, wait for one another. If anyone is hungry, let him eat at home, so that when you come together, will not be for judgment. About the other things, I will give directions when I come.
All right. So that last section deals with unworthiness to take the Lord's Supper, which is an interesting thing, right?
Well, and I kind of get impression here that it's not for us to judge
Yeah.
or to, you did it wrong, but it's for each of us in our own heart to make our own decisions, to have our own conscience, about what we do and don't. It's between us and God
Yeah.
and nobody else.
And to take the cup and the bread flippantly, I think, is the issue. It's like when we do it, it's really remembering what Christ's sacrifice meant and what those elements meant, and it's telling the story. It's a chance to explain to your kids, when they don't know what it means. It's like what the blood, what the grape juice represents, and it's a pretty powerful, I guess, reminder and tool of love and service when it was being misused here, even being about your status and I guess elitism, which really even gets back into the worship and all the head coverings and stuff. They just had some things out of whack, and just even that last verse, you're just wondering, so what were the other things?
The other things that he doesn't pick up here.
And anytime I read stuff like this, I always think about, okay, if God was writing a letter to North Orange, what would be chapter 11 for us? What would be the things? Is like, guys, really,
Yeah.
So it's real easy to see others and pick apart their shortcomings, but anytime I'm doing that, God's constantly whispering at me, Rusty, you got your issues too. North Orange has issues too.
Yeah. And, we do our best in our practice of the Lord's Supper to, we do it very deliberately. We have I call it close communion. I didn't come up with that, but we call it close communion, which is not open communion, which is just everybody take it and you judge for yourself if you're a believer or whatever. We say that we prefer to give the cup to a baptized believer, but to my knowledge, we've never been like, no, not you, and, kind of pulled it back. But we just say, I know in my family what I've seen with each of my kids. In fact, we just, Baylor came forward to be baptized a month or so ago, and one of the sort of precipitating factors in that was that every time we were passing out the Lord's Supper, we gave it to Brinley, we gave it to Dax, and we didn't give it to her, and we didn't give it to Dutch. And she was like, I want the Lord's Supper. And we're like, you don't get the Lord's Supper. You're not a Christian yet. And she was like, but I'm part of this family. I'm like, that's not it. It's not about being part of this family. And so it definitely gives us, as parents, it gives us an opportunity to have those conversations with our kids, which is why I always encourage people, don't give it to your kids until they've been baptized. But I've never stopped anybody who wants to. So, yeah. But I think it's important to give ourselves a chance to judge. And this really keeps in line with what we see in the Old Testament, covenantal practices around, sacrifice, where Jesus says, if you're taking your sacrifice to the altar and you remember that you've sinned against your brother, leave your offering, go and be reconciled. I think this is the church's way to practice that same thing. It's like, if you're about to take the cup and you remembered, I was a real stinker to so-and-so, just put the drink down and go and talk to them and work it out. So, all right. Did y'all have anything else that we want to pick up from that chapter?
Well, I think that the Corinthian society probably really resembles ours in a lot of ways, because it was it was a place where there were a lot of cultures, a lot of religions. The Greeks were about, the ideas of the Greeks are what really are the foundations of our government and our society as well. So maybe we can see a lot of things in ourselves when we look at Corinthians. So.
Yeah. And it was also a largely secular society.
Yeah.
So I say secular. They weren't Christians, but even there was idolatrous practices going on, but not everybody in the culture was connected to those. So.
Well, and go back to chapter 10 and your devotion from yesterday. I mean, our personal freedoms. I mean, that's a biggie, because we have freedom in Christ to do a lot of things, but we also give up our freedoms because we love someone more than we care about our freedom to do or not to do something. And that gets complicated, because once again, we want to make our freedom and our rules your rules, and that's not how it works.
Yeah, that's right. So, all right. So what other things do we have this afternoon to share with our people?
Yeah, I didn't make a list. Just a couple quick things. When we're talking about the area of giving, that's come up this week. One of the questions, like, because of the COVID and stuff, we've not been passing a plate like Baptists traditionally do, And so we've not been communicating real well about, how to give during our church services. And so we have a box at the back of the room that, as people give, you place that in. And you can also give online. Also, a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Chip was preaching through a sermon series about talents.
Yeah.
And so we had this challenge that ended on Easter. And so where we passed out different amounts of money. I think it was like $2, $3, $5. There's maybe one or two bags that had $10. So the initial amount of money we started with that was given out was
200. Yeah, it was
200
under 300.
something
Like
dollars.
$280 that we gave out.
And just share.
Yeah, and so our results out of that is that we have, and this isn't complete because this doesn't match all the talents, because there were a lot of people who took that money and they did things with it. Like, I know one person baked pies and she gave people pies, and and kind of gave a gospel message with the pies. But other people made cards and just did missional sort of things with their talents. But some people did things to make that money multiply. And so what we have as a result of that $280 seed being planted, we got back $7,744, which is, a 10, 20, 30, I don't know, 30 times. I can't do the math right now, but yeah, pretty great. A pretty great return. I guess 300% return on that. So, yeah, awesome.
So pretty cool. Also today we're talking about like next gen and stuff for our kids and our youth coming up this summer with Kid Week, and so really excited about that, and really planning some things to be really big this summer. That event is free for kids. I think it's June 27th. Starts on Sunday, goes through Thursday, where we have a family night for families that Thursday evening. But we're brainstorming some a big water day, some big inflatables, games.
And we're going to do some things that are going to be, really kind of over the top. And we are going to have to limit our number of people involved, number of students that we can take. We're limited to 100. We feel like we can put on a really great program for 100 kids. And so it'll be kind of first come, first serve. So if you have yourself, your children, grandchildren that you want to be a part of our Kid Week, make sure to go online to nobcfamily.com and follow the links to our Kid Week link, and go ahead and fill out the registration to get connected so we can kind of get you reserved a place for Kid Week.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. Also excited about going to Mission Arlington with our students. It'll be the first week of the summer. In order to make those plans too, we need people to go ahead and start registering. You can do that by going to nobcfamily.com and finding those registration links. And we have camp. We had a little bit of confusion with those dates initially, because when we had a text message that we were set one set of dates, but they're actually like a date off. So just be sure to look online. But that's coming up in July, junior high camp and high school camp. And those types of experiences, I mean, those are chances where we, our kids go and you get away from the norms of, being on YouTube all day or Netflix or gaming and or whatever it is that you do with your time, to get away and connect with God and connect with others. So really pumped about some things going on this summer.
And even in the next month, we've got several things. Mother's Day, we'll have recognition of our mothers, and then we'll have our Graduate Sunday on May 23rd, where we'll recognize all of our graduating seniors.
And Next Gen Takeover.
And that'll be a Next Gen Takeover, so it'll be a little bit different kind of worship service, but it'll be fun, exciting. And then on May 30th, we'll have our Remembrance Sunday. So if you've lost someone in your family or in our church community that you want to be remembered on that day, make sure to get us a photo of them by the 26th. So
And we're still taking offerings for Annie Armstrong.
Yeah, so thinking Annie Armstrong offerings. So.
And men's ministry, women tonight.
Yeah, men's ministry
Wednesday
tonight,
night.
women's ministry tonight, all of our
It's
Wednesday
Wednesday.
night thing. It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
So we're excited,
Food for
and anyway, going to have a great time tonight. So
Can't remember
Guess
what
we'll find
the
out.
supper menu is, but I know Glenda McKay is cooking. So
yeah, so it will be good.
It's always a win.
It will be good. So
Any of our teams, awesome.
yeah, it'll be good. So all right, we all
Roast
have
pork loin,
roast pork loin. Oh, that will be real good.
mashed potatoes and gravy.
Good. All right. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in today. And again, if you have any questions about anything that we talked through today, you can post it in the comments to this video. We'll get back and look at those. And if you have any comments, we'll pick them up next week, or any questions next week, we'll pick them up at the start of our show next week. So have a great day.
Have a great day.
Yeah. Got some hearts and grits to see you, but no questions.